After UFC Saudi Arabia, Israel Adesanya is cooked as a middleweight title contender.
I think that's an overreaction, and I'll tell you why.
Wow.
I think if you look at the way that historic as a contender, maybe as a champion, I don't think he'll get back to holding gold, but I think sometimes we forget how much weight somebody's name can hold in getting them matchups that make sense for them to get back. Like the division right now, if you look at it at this point in time, kind of in a, if we put our tunnel vision on and we just look at what's going on right now, you might look at it and say, hey, look at who's above him, right? There's Dricus that beat him. There's Strickland that beat him. Now Imavov's above him. He beat him. So he's got three guys essentially in front of him that have already beaten him and that have beaten him soundly. Two of them finished him. One of them dominated him. So there's really no clear path to the title. He's got to get up some momentum, first of all. He's got to, kind of rack up some wins. But for me, I think if time passes, if different contenders emerge, if Dricus loses the belt, who knows what Kyle Barallo is going to do? There's all sorts of things that can happen. So I think in terms of him being at the top of that division and being a contender, I wouldn't say necessarily that he's cooked, because he's got that advantage where when he comes back, when he's ready, I think the UFC is going to put him in a fight that is not only one that he probably actually has a little bit of say in what kind of matchups made, but also one that they perhaps see as a big fight for him too. He's kind of got that privilege from what he's accomplished. So I don't think he's cooked as a contender. I think to say that he couldn't have success and go on to become a champion, then that's where you would get me. That I would agree with that.
Okay. So then what is that fight? What is the fight? How long are we talking here now too? Because, Izzy's in this got to go back to the drawing board mode. He was already there not too long ago where he said he was going to take some time off. Here we go again, going to take some time off, figure it out. But what is that fight then, Nolan, when he comes back? How is he going to get back to another title shot potentially?
It's tough. I think the thing that's working against him, and this is a little outside the box here, but I think at this point in his career, if he was in a different division or if he was a different person with a different build, this would be a time to try to explore maybe a different weight class, right? But he doesn't really have that advantage because he's very much built for 185. I mean, we saw when he fought Jan Blachowicz a couple years ago, it was very obvious the size and strength, difference that he had fighting a real light heavyweight. I mean, he weighed 202 or 203 pounds on the scale. So he doesn't have that luxury. So he is kind of stuck to a certain degree. And that's why I think, taking some time off, for relative to him, taking 6 months off, 9 months off, will let things kind of figure themselves out. You got Barallo, you've got guys like Anthony Hernandez that are climbing up. Who knows who's going to kind of creep into the top five. So, and who knows how this fight next weekend is going to play out too. Things might work out where he comes back and a fight with Sean Strickland kind of makes sense. Maybe they both need to get back on the horse and fight again. So, I think something like a fighter that is a contender that needs to be rebuilt like him, or perhaps somebody that's building up like the couple guys I named, Barallo, Hernandez, somebody like that could be also in the future.
Noli, I got to tell you, man, I got to be honest. When you bring up the names like Kyle Barallo and Anthony Hernandez, what goes through my head is gatekeeper. I hate thinking of Izzy as a gatekeeper, man, but that's what I think of now, And I mean, listen, let me just tell you this, all right? I think Izzy's done competing for a championship. I don't think he's going to get back there. Clearly, I've told you that. I think he's cooked as a contender. And I think we're entering gatekeeper mode, which is really sad for me to think about, because last week we talked about this with Goes. We needed Izzy to win. We needed him to win definitively. We needed a big name like Izzy to stay at the top. The fact that he's not there anymore hurts. Now, what I will say, though, Nolan, is I really do think Izzy did this to himself. I think he did this to himself because I think he started believing in his own hype at some point. He had that string of fights after the Jan Blachowicz fight where he failed to win the heavyweight title. That string of fights that happened afterward, those title defenses against Marvin Vettori, against Jared Cannonier, against Robert Whittaker, those fights were a lot of cases of overhype, underdeliver, where Izzy was talking so much, right? And those fights were just like him outpointing guys. They were boring, they were dull. It was almost like he started just fighting not to lose, and that hurt Izzy. That really did hurt Izzy. I felt like. And I don't know. I just feel like mentally he started believing his own hype too much, and it really changed who he was as a fighter. You know, then you get into the losses, and then everything went out the door after that, right? The Alex Pereira loss, you know, Strickland, Duplessis, like he's better than those last two guys. He's better than those two guys. But the only way I can explain it is that Izzy just mentally doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good points, and I think they're things that should be addressed. I do think that sometimes we overlook, and I have talked to a lot of like coaches about this too, is just like the age and wear and tear issue, and just being a fighter that's getting up there in fight years and life years. Sometimes everybody's looking for an explanation, right? Oh, you know, maybe he's going to fix his technique. Maybe he's in his own head. Maybe, you know, he didn't fight smarter. He believed his hype. Like, there's an element where I'm like, this just kind of happens to people too. Like aging fighters, they maybe aren't as quick. Maybe the things that they were insufficient at, you know, maybe like the sequence of the finish we saw on Saturday. Like maybe his reflexes are just a little not what they used to be, or maybe, you know, he should his reads are a little bit off just from going through these wars and not being quite the fighter he was. Like I think there's a natural element too, but it's so hard because there's so many different aspects of fighting. There's the element of like you put these guys in the cage 10 times with the outcomes that we saw. Are they the most likely? Like, was this the one time that Nassourdine could have beaten him? Izzy put out a good first round, but you need a bigger sample size. And to look at the last 5 fights for Izzy, obviously he's been in the loss column quite a bit. So I'm glad I'm not a coach. I'm glad I'm not like a fight breakdown guy, because I think I would be extremely frustrated, like going back and having to really look at the tape and try to figure out, is this something we can fix, or is this something that just is the way that human life is and the way that fighters age? So that's for Eugene Behrman, and I guess we'll see what they come up with, because it's at a time where I'm not really sure what the answer is. I don't know how you fix this at this point.
Okay, I need you to entertain one more thought for me on Izzy, okay?
Sure.
On Saturday night after I watched the fight, I put a tweet out there that there was no telling how much greater Izzy could have been if Alex Pereira had never come to the UFC. We just talked about the mental aspect. And of course, when Alex came, he had lost to him, you know, twice in kickboxing. He was the boogeyman. They had their 2 fights, right? Gets knocked out, which made his comeback to knock him out in the rematch even greater. And it just felt like that was the biggest flex for Izzy too. And like he had just slayed his demon, slayed the dragon, conquered, you know, his biggest evil, his biggest threat. And like that maybe just relieved so much pressure that, you know, that was it. That was the highest point that he reached. Because I just think 35, like you talk about him, the wear and tear, I didn't expect this from Izzy at 35. I think he still has the skills. But man, Alex, I think just changed everything for him. Would you agree with that to any degree?
To a certain degree. I mean, to me, like it's kind of it's weird to weigh their legacies because they're so intertwined. And I think Alex kind of stole his thunder a little bit, right? Like he came in and he kind of did what Izzy was trying to do, and he did it better, and he was more exciting, and he got the fanfare. And like I think that's not to overshadow what Izzy's done. Like I think, you know, if the world blows up tomorrow, Israel Adesanya is the second greatest middleweight in MMA history, essentially. So, and Alex has kind of got this weird legacy, almost like DC, right? Where, you know, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time, but you can't really put him in he's not the greatest middle-weight of all time. He's not the greatest light heavyweight of all time. So I think Izzy does have that sort of accolade, the accolades in his back pocket you can't argue with. I think the biggest disservice to him was not being able to have, you know, that third fight in MMA. You know, I think for me, that would be the one that would really propel him, you know, and kind of help rebound his legacy a little bit.
Well, maybe there's a path. Maybe there's a path to do that at 205 or something, you know, as he's competed there before. Maybe that's the one. We'll see. But man, you know, it saddens me that we're talking about Izzy in this sense. I'd love to see a comeback, but I just don't see it, man. I don't see a comeback to his career. Yeah. All right, man.
MMA Junkie AI.